Hello and welcome. This is a public affairs forum sponsored by the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin, Texas. My name is Luther Elmore. We hold these public affairs forums on most second and third Sundays of every month here at our church, 4700 Grover. They're held at noon. We invite you to join us, where you can ask our speakers questions of your own. We've been holding these forums since 1954, when this church was first incorporated, and they're done to inspire and motivate our membership to help us into social justice and to social action. You can find information about the forums on our church website, austinuu.org. Today, our speaker is Jackie Nirenberg. She is the Community Engagement Manager for Capital Metro. Jackie is originally from Brownsville. She attended the University of Texas, where she received a Bachelor of Science in Advertising and a Master of Arts in Journalism, obviously a direct path for work with Capital Metro. Today, she will speak to us about Capital Metro's vision. This is Capital Metro's vision for a more reliable, more equitable, and more connected public transportation system. All of us here know that the two problems most often cited in regards to our quality of living here in Austin are public transportation and affordable housing. And so today we look forward to Jackie's presentation to tell us how Capital Metro is addressing one of those issues. Jackie.
Thank you, Luther, and thank you so much for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Tanya, for making this happen. Looks like I'm running low on power. I hope I don't lose my presentation along the way. But my name is Jackie Nirenberg. I am the Community Engagement Manager at Capital Metro. How many of you here remember a time where you could get on Mopac at Research Boulevard at the time and drive all the way downtown in about 9 minutes? Me too. I've lived in Austin 3 times, and 2 of those 3 times it was like that. Well, things have changed a lot now. How many of you are tired of sitting in traffic? Well, I'm here to tell you that there's nothing we can do about that traffic. Your commute today is the best commute you're going to have, and that's pretty daunting. But we're here to talk about offering an alternative to folks who want to use an alternative, and that's called Project Connect. But before I go into Project Connect, I want to tell you a little bit about how Cap Metro has changed since 1985, when it was formed. We're not your grandparents' Capital Metro anymore, and in the last 3 or so years, we've innovated more new services and initiatives than we have in a very long time. Our ridership is on the rise. Is that a big deal? Yes, it's a huge deal. We're one of maybe a handful of agencies that is seeing a rise in ridership. Most are seeing a decline in ridership, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is the rideshare industry, for example. But we have seen a steady increase in our ridership over the last 15 months, every single month. And what that tells us is that people are ready to use transit. Another innovation that we have just brought on board for Capital Metro is electric buses, and part of Project Connect is to use a fleet that's entirely zero emissions. That's our goal. And so this is also part of the environmental push to get to help Austin's environmental quality. Transit does that to begin with, but electric buses, even better. So we brought our first 2 buses online just 2 weeks ago. We're going to be getting 8 more coming in May. We have new bus stop amenities. With some of you may have noticed the new Metro bus shelters. How many of you are riders, Capital Metro riders, occasionally? Okay. Oh my goodness, I'm preaching to the choir here. No pun intended. So we have a lot of new stops that have gone up. I think we've put up about 125 new stops this year, well, since summer of last year. And those have real-time information, departure information, and solar lighting. So we're making improvements to our bus stops to make it more comfortable and hospitable for our riders. We have a new service called Pickup. There's this little vehicle that's shown on the PowerPoint here. Have you seen these guys driving around town, anyone? Okay, this is a pretty new service, and we deployed these in 6 different areas. And what it is an app-based ride share, on-demand ride share service, just like an Uber or a Lyft. The only difference is it's $1.25 a ride. So it's a much more affordable service. There is an app for it. It's called Pickup. Yeah, good one. So if you live within these zones, we've got one in the St. David's North area. We've got one in Northeast Austin. We've got one in East Austin. We've got one on the Exposition, in the Exposition area. We just opened one in Leander. We've got one in Manor, and we're looking forward to adding more. So you'll be hearing more about these things. And basically what they are is within a designated zone of each neighborhood, which is usually about 4 to 6 square miles, the pickup vehicle will pick you up. If you call it, you can also use the telephone. You don't have to use a smartphone. Not everybody has a smartphone. And it'll come and pick you up within 15 minutes and take you anywhere you want to go within the zone. HEB, we try to include the grocery store, churches, clinics, schools, and shopping areas. And the idea is that you get a connection to the nearest bus stop or train station as well. About a year and a half ago, we redesigned our entire bus network. You may have heard of CAP Remap. And that was, the purpose for that was we kept hearing from our community that they wanted more frequency of service. In other words, not having to consult a schedule to be able to ride the bus. You know there's going to be another one coming in 15 minutes or less. And in order to do that, we had to realign a lot of our bus routes. In order to do that, some of the bus routes, these legacy routes that had been running for many, many years that were meandering into neighborhoods, unfortunately, we had to pull some of those out to align the routes to provide that frequent, reliable service. As a mitigation for that, we deployed the first pickup pilots in those neighborhoods where it's a little bit too far for people to walk to the stop, and this will take them to the stop or anywhere else in the zone they want to go. So that's our new pickup service. And we're building a new downtown station, and that's going to be opening up in 2021. So we're very excited about that. And what that's going to do for our Metro Rail commuter rail service, it's going to allow us to run much more frequent rail service too. If you've ever taken the train, if you happen to use it during the peak travel times, it is standing room only now. And we're getting a lot of complaints for our folks in Leander and the Lakeline area that we need more rail service, we need more Metro Rail service. Up until now, we have not been able to provide that. People ask us, why don't you run on Sunday, for example? Why is there such a big window of time you don't run on Saturdays? It's because we share that rail line with the freight service. And so safety dictates we cannot be on the same rail when freight is running. We've been working on something called positive train control, which has been a mandate nationally to make passenger rail service more safe. And that's going to allow us to circumvent the freight service by building sidings and double tracking in areas. And when the new downtown station opens up, there'll be a triple track. So we can not just go back and forth, our trains go back and forth on the same track. We'll actually have more than one operating at the same time to offer bidirectional service. That's going to increase frequency to about 10 minutes to 15 minutes, which will make a big difference for folks who are using that commuter line. Last year, our board voted to make riding free for all kids age K through 12, and that was a really exciting development for us. And as a result, we've given over 3 billion rides to kids K through 12. What we're hearing is that kids are able to explore their city now when they weren't able to before. They have the freedom to go do after-school activities if they don't have a parent available who can pick them up or take them. It's freedom for parents, too, who, are enslaved by those after-school activities sometimes that their kids have to go to. So it's really opened up a whole lot of opportunity for our kids. It's creating a whole generation of transit users, which bodes well for the city, and it bodes well for Capital Metro as well. So, Austin, we've got a little problem. Our metro area is about 2 million in population. And the prediction is that by 2040, we will be 4 million. And with only about 15% of availability of area to build roads. So, as I mentioned, that commute's not going to get any better. And so what do we do about that? Somebody's got to do something, and people we talk to in the community are just like, somebody do something. We don't know what, but somebody do something. Well, we're going to do something. Just to give you an idea of what our peer cities have been doing over the years, Los Angeles just invested $120 billion that'll be spent over 40 years, but it's quite a big investment. And if you remember, LA used to be the car-centric capital of the United States. And they have finally figured out that they're going to have an alternative for people who don't want to be sitting on the 405 on those 16 lanes of gridlock traffic every day. And they've finally embraced transit in a big way. Seattle, same thing. They invested $54 billion. In 2016, when Austin passed the $720 million bond improvement, the mobility bond improvement bond, that same day, Seattle passed a $54 billion transit bond. So it gives you an idea of the scale that we're talking about. Denver has invested $8 billion. Minneapolis, which is smaller than Austin, has invested $3.1 billion. Indianapolis, also smaller than Austin. They've all invested quite a bit of money, and we're getting to the point where we really need to start thinking about investing that level for Austin. We've been kicking the can down the road a long time in the transit area, and if you all were around in 2014, were you guys around for the 2014 referendum that failed miserably? We learned a lot of lessons from that referendum. One of the things we learned is that people want to see what's in it for them, and that's natural. You know, everybody wants to, oh, I forgot I can't walk away from this. Everybody wants to see what's in it for them. And so what we had to do differently, one of the things we had to do differently is to offer a system of projects, not just one alignment, which is how it came out. And that's what people saw the last time around. It was actually part of a bigger system, but it didn't get communicated. So we learned that. We learned that we need to talk to more people, engage with more people. People need to understand what this is. And one of the things that I tell people, yes, we are likely moving toward a referendum in 2020, November 2020. I think it's going to be a big turnout year. I'm not sure, but it seems like there'll be a lot of people turning out for that election. We can't tell you guys to vote for it. That's not our place. What Capital Metro does is develop the best plan possible and hand it to our community based on community input and technical analysis, and hand it to our community and hope that everybody can make an educated decision, which is why we're trying to get out and talking to as many people as possible. So where we are in the program, did anybody pick up one of those vision maps? Because that'll help you. Yeah, okay, great. So that is basically the system that we're envisioning at this point. We are nowhere near set in stone on this system. This is still a conceptual vision, and we are still taking input. It is still fluid. On March the 9th, we're going to have a big milestone. March the 9th is when our staff is going to recommend to our board of directors and city council what we think the system plan will be. That system plan, for sure, is going to include something called TRANSITWAYS. Because the only way that we're not going to be sitting in traffic with everybody else, and all of you here are bus riders, I saw you raise your hands, you know that our buses are not on time a lot of times. And that's a frustrating thing, and we get that. The problem is we're sitting in the same traffic as everybody else. So we need a solution that's going to allow us to operate high-capacity transit and not fight the traffic. And the answer to that is TRANSITWAYS. TRANSITWAYS are dedicated paths, dedicated roadways that are built specifically for transit. That's all that is. And our system plan that we're proposing proposes two of these. One is the orange line, and the name may change, so that's really not important, but it runs north and south, all the way up from Tech Ridge down to Slaughter, 21 miles of dedicated transitway. The other one is the blue line, and that goes from the airport into downtown, and depending on the configuration of how the service is going to operate, possibly up to ACC Highland. So those are the centerpieces of the plan. But just because people don't live along those corridors, which the blue line would run mostly on East Riverside Drive, the orange line mostly on Lamar, Guadalupe, and South Congress, doesn't mean that you're not going to have a positive impact from those two transitways. Because if you've got two, I like to think of them as like the roto-rooters of the system, busting through traffic, moving reliably, nothing is impeding that on-time performance, then the rest of the system, including the local bus service, will operate more efficiently. And that's the whole premise behind the system. It's not just about the two transitways, though. We're also proposing adding 7 new Metro Rapid services. If you're familiar with the bendy buses, the red bendy buses that travel in partially dedicated lanes downtown, that's called Metro Rapid Service. Some people think of it as Bus Rapid Transit or BRT. It's really not. It's more like a BRT light, but it does have priority treatments, including a priority lane, which some people are still learning how to deal with that. I notice people like driving in that lane all the time, and I'm like, no. But it takes an education. It's going to take a while for the community to start to understand how all this stuff works. In our defense, this is a new thing for us. It also has signal timing, priority signal timing at traffic intersections. You may have seen the traffic light that looks like a little bar, a little white bar, and it turns white and off goes the bus. And we get people calling us all the time going, your buses are running red lights, Another education thing that we're going to have to work on. But so those are that's the Metro Rapid service, and we're proposing 7 more of those all over the city. So that's a component that people will feel a direct impact from. Additionally, we're proposing, excuse me, more Metro bus stations that have more amenities, park and rides. We have a lot of people who have had to leave Austin because they just cannot afford to be here anymore. But they have to work here every day. So we've got to be able to get them in and out of here efficiently. So more park and rides on the periphery of the city to allow people to connect into the services. Neighborhood circulators. I mentioned pickup. Pickup is one way to do it. There probably are other ways that we can provide neighborhood circulation, that first and last mile connection for people. But we want to deploy a whole lot more of those. Pardon me. You will see those on your vision map. Those are little green circles. Where those circles are is still pretty conceptual, but it'll give you an idea that we want them dispersed throughout the area. Additionally, there are some other benefits that come from this kind of transit investment. One of them is placemaking or creative placekeeping. It's also called public art. So we're going to be building a lot of infrastructure if this plan goes forward. That's an opportunity to create beautiful places. Infrastructure does not have to be ugly. There are places along the corridors, the transitways, for example, that are going to encounter some pinch points in those corridors. For example, in the UT area on Guadalupe, pretty tight, lots of conflicts going on. So we may have to go up in that area. So aerial is one possibility. Tunneling is another. I see people shaking their heads. That's the kind of input we want to hear from you all. So one of the proposals is to build a downtown tunnel because that area has by far the most conflicts for construction. That tunnel would cost us about $2 billion. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. However, that investment actually could facilitate the rest of the system moving quicker. There are pros and cons to everything. So that's one of the things we're considering. Yes, sir. There are already some downtown tunnels existing. Are we thinking of building more downtown tunnels? Is that the question? Okay. This one specifically would be in the area of downtown between Cesar Chavez and about 12th Street. So it's about a 1.6 mile section that's being looked at. Again, far from a done deal. The community has to support this. It's an expensive piece to add on. But one thing I do want to get across, and it's something that I've learned, I'm not a technical person, so I've learned a lot the last few years about how this stuff works. And the planners tell me that a downtown tunnel would allow the rest of the system to move quicker because it's that same principle that the transitways have. More reliable service. It spreads out to the other services as well. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold. Thank you. Okay, so those are the components of the system. And now I'll tell you a little bit about the timeline. So in March, we're going to be presenting the recommended plan. We will have until the end of May to take public input. And people ask me all the time, how can we get involved? This is how you can help us. Because we need people to know what it is they're going to be voting on, likely. We need people to be educated. They don't have to support it. We don't expect everybody to be in support of this. But we want them to know what it is, to make an educated decision. And in order to do that, we got to talk to lots of people. So far, we've talked to 35,000 people, a little bit more. That sounds like a lot. It is nothing. I mean, what do we just talked about 2 million people living in this metro area. We got a long way to go. Now, we will be launching some education media campaigns to help people gain awareness and understanding of what it is we're talking about when we talk about Project Connect, and that's going to be rolling out starting in March. But we still need folks to be out there talking about it because ultimately, it's the conversations you have with your family and your neighbors and your colleagues at work. A little bit about transitways, just so you can see if you still can't envision what I'm talking about. On the left, you see, on my left, that would be your right, the traffic is operating, the buses are operating in mixed traffic. That's what we see now, mostly. And then on the right, you see what a transitway would look like. Now, you may think, boy, that's not enough room for everybody to drive. But if you can get people out of their cars, some of those people are going to be in these buses, and we're going to actually get more throughput in these intersections than we would if it was all mixed. I was talking a little bit about placemaking and what new transit infrastructure can actually bring to a community. These are some examples of some really cool placemaking projects, one in Houston Metro, in Denver. We also have the opportunity to use the newest technology. There's some really amazing things being done around the world that aren't happening here in the States just yet. One of the things is this light rail system that has a current that goes underground as opposed to the wire catenary system that you see with most light rail systems. A hydrogen bus, for example, an autonomous bus that's actually operating in Singapore right now. This is in the future. There's no question about it. Autonomous technology is coming. It's here. It's just not being used as mass transit yet here in the States. So anything that we build, we're going to be trying to future-proof as much as possible because we want this to last us a long time. That brings me to another area of conversation that will be interesting. When we make our recommendation in March to the board and to the council, it's going to include mode. When I say mode, I mean the vehicle. And there's people in this city who get very, very heated up about the vehicle. Is it going to be train or is it going to be a bus rapid transit system? We will find out. Some of the things that we're looking at, because there are trade-offs to both. Bus rapid transit is a less expensive system to build and run, no question about it. Where the tipping point is in capacity to carry people. So when our technical teams have done ridership modeling, they have determined that by 2040, the bus rapid transit investment could conceivably be leaving people on the curb during peak hours by 2040. 2040 sounds like a long time away, but it's really not that far away. We're talking 20 years. So that's one of the things the community needs to decide. Do we want to try and future-proof, again, that future-proofing, so that our investment takes us longer, takes us further into the future, or are we okay coming back in 20 years and making another investment? It's up to us. I mentioned that one of the goals of Project Connect is a zero-emissions fleet. We've begun that process so far. This bus that you see in the photo here, a couple of weeks ago, we unveiled our first 2 electric buses, and to celebrate those, we asked the elementary school students at Campbell Elementary School, which is an academy of art and visual design, media, and performing arts, which is a wonderful program. It's amazing. So we had a contest with these kids who are very artsy to draw something, paint something that they envision as a sustainable future for Austin. And they turned in all of these wonderful designs, and we had a panel of artists and educators decide the winning designs. In the end, we had about 25 winners, and so we did a collage on 2 buses, and you'll see those driving around town. You'll notice those are the quiet vehicles. They're extremely quiet. The other thing that's really cool about these electric vehicles is that when you're standing next to a bus, you often feel a lot of heat coming off of it. That's gone. It doesn't have the same noises, the kneeling. In fact, they sometimes add a beeping to make sure people know it's coming because it's so quiet. But it's much better for the environment than the diesel-powered engines. Construction is now underway. If you know the area on Burnett, just north of 183, there was a Serta factory there. That is now Capital Metro property, and we demolished that building, and we're building a charging facility for 214 electric buses. So we're very excited about that. And in the end, Project Connect envisions an all-electric fleet, or better. There may be another technology that's better down the road, but zero emissions is what we're going for. I mentioned we've reached out to about 35,000 people. We've got a long way to go. We've been doing that in a lot of ways. We do our public meetings, but as you all know, those of you that are engaged have the luxury of time and the ability to attend public meetings. It's the same folks at every meeting. It's the people who have the opportunity to be engaged, the luxury of time. And so we have to go out to where people are, too. One of the things that we have employed recently is a street team to be out and about in the community at all of our wonderful events that are happening all the time in Austin, and just handing out very high-level information just to create that awareness so people know there's something called Project Connect out there, and maybe I want to find out more. We set up tables where people are and give out information. We come to speak to groups like you. I've done talks in living rooms before. We'll do them anywhere. And that brings me back to the point before we got our technology back, is how can people help us? What you can do is reach out to your friends and neighbors, your organizations that you belong to, and get a group together who might be interested in hearing us talk about this and have a conversation about this. And we will go anywhere you want us to go. I have a team of 5 people, but we also have a technical team who's available. We're going to be training Speakers Bureau very soon so that other community members can also do this with a kit that's very easy to use. So we are trying every which way we can to create awareness, create conversation about this, create understanding about this, and we are open to ideas from everybody. So please feel free to reach out to us at projectconnect.com. That's the feedback email, feedback@projectconnect.com. It goes directly to me, and we will make it happen. The other thing we've done is we've engaged 2 advisory groups that have helped us along the way for the last 3 years. One is our technical advisory group. So Capital Metro is not part of the city, and a lot of people don't realize that. We are our own entity. And what that means is we don't own any right-of-way except for our stations. So we rely on the city and other partners to provide the right-of-way we'll need to make this happen. Now, in the past, coordination between us and other partners, the city, the TxDOT, all of our partners, has not been the most seamless, shall we say, and things have changed dramatically. Our coordination is more than weekly. We have a weekly meeting of technical groups from the city, from TxDOT, from the county that all meet from Campo to talk about this very thing. Not to mention the other initiatives that are going on in the city, like the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan that was passed last year. We had to work very closely with them to make sure that the policies they set include opportunities for right-of-way for public transit, which they do. The Bond Corridor Program. We want to coordinate with the Bond Corridor Program so that we're not redoing the hard work they're doing with your hard-earned money already. So we're coordinating those efforts very carefully, slowing down on some corridors where we want to put new Metro Rapid service as part of Project Connect, for example, so that we're in line and in time with each other. The Land Development Code, another thing that will affect the way we do this. So we need to be in touch with all of these departments on a regular basis. And at the policy-making level, our leadership is too. So that's been a wonderful movement toward that collaboration and coordination with all of our partners. We also have something called the Project Connect Community Ambassador Network, also called the PCAN. And I invite any one of you who is passionate about this issue to join us on the PCAN. We are always open to new members. The idea behind that network is to include as many perspectives at the table as possible. We tend to hear a lot from some very passionate transit advocates in our community, and that's wonderful. But we also need other perspectives too. We need perspectives that represent social justice. We need perspectives that represent education, that represent healthcare, that represent economic development. Everybody's got faith communities. So if you have the time and the passion for this issue, we invite you to join our PCAN. We meet once a month on Wednesday evenings usually. We provide dinner. Your time is valuable, and we appreciate you volunteering it to be with us. And we talk about the latest development of the project and get feedback from the group. It's a good sounding board for us. For example, when we're developing communications materials, does this make sense to people? You know, some of us have been in this realm for 3 years, and you forget how to communicate what this transit-y speak is all about. So that kind of feedback is really important to moving our communications efforts forward, and we get a lot of feedback on the technical level as well. We have folks that will tell us this crossing, for example, does not make sense. And we'll do some really deep dive conversations with folks who have some technical expertise and talk about why. And it does affect the way that the plan develops. So those are some of the ways that we're engaging with our community. Some of our upcoming milestones. During this period, we're doing exactly what I'm doing today, is getting out to the community, talking to as many people as possible, answering questions, taking feedback. And then once March 9th comes around and we have that recommendation, we'll actually have a pretty solid idea of what we want this plan to look like and whether we're going to be proposing light rail or whether we're proposing bus rapid transit on those transitways. So we'll be going back out to the community. There will be online opportunities. We're having 10 public meetings in each of the council districts. We'll also be having neighborhood meetings all over the place. Any opportunities for us to go to people and get their feedback, we'll be at the Kite Festival, for example, where people from all over the city and outside the city come to events like that. And we'll have, like I mentioned, online opportunities to do that. Every time we have a series of open house or public meetings, we provide an opportunity online to participate for those who just can't make it. And then we also try to give the opportunity to people where they are, so they don't have to make time in their schedules to come to us. Then that input period will go through the end of May. On May 28th, that's when we expect for our board and council to vote on that recommendation. So any input that we will have gotten from the community on that plan will have informed, refined the plan, and that's what will go forward for the vote. Then after that, we're off to the races. That's when the city will take it over and develop referendum language, determine the funding mechanism they're going to propose, because it doesn't have to be a bond. There are other tools they can use. And then likely, like I mentioned, November 2020, I believe that's November 3rd this year, there will be some kind of city referendum on Project Connect. But that's just the beginning, because if it passes, that's when we're really going to get busy and really start to engage the community in a very, very nuts and bolts sort of way. Because then we begin the engineering work and the design work, and that's when we really start to figure out, is this going to be the plan that we proposed, and how is it going to differ because of things like utility conflicts or communities that are very concerned about a certain treatment of the transitway. So we're going to be going all the way down each of those big corridors, for example, and working with the community. Now, people ask me, pardon me, all the time, how long before we see something, right? Because everybody wants to see something. If they want to see it happen, they want it now. And I totally get that. I'm very impatient as well. If we do a rail project, that will likely be online about 2028. If we do a bus rapid transit project, it's probably a couple of years sooner, by like 2026. However, there are some projects that we can get on the ground pretty quickly. And for example, the 7 Metro Rapid lines, those can go online very quickly, and those will have an immediate and really positive impacts on the communities they're going to be serving. So the park and rides, we'll begin looking at park and ride opportunities as soon as possible. That is not an easy feat. Finding land in this area in Central Texas is very challenging, but we're going to be working very hard with partners who can maybe help us lease some property for a park and ride situation. The New Life Church, for example, at the Howard Lane station, they lease parking space for us to do a park and ride there. So there's all kinds of creative ways we can do it. In any case, we'll be looking for early wins as much as possible, to start to give the community the feeling that, yes, things are happening and making a difference a little bit at a time until we get these big projects on board. So that's the presentation I have for you, and I'm happy to open up to questions now. I'm sure you have a million of them, so.
Thank you, Jackie. And once again, we'll ask you for questions. Please identify yourself by name, and I will go around. And please keep your questions short and direct so that Ms. Nirenberg can answer those questions. Many of you might have personal stories, either positive or negative, about Capital Metro. However, we do not have time to hear those. And so we'd ask Ms. Nirenberg to answer those questions. And one of our previous questioners.
I was just wondering if you could tell me or give an estimate on the percent ridership. In other words, we have so many buses. How full are they? Are those buses mostly running full, or are they halfway? And the same with the rail.
Yeah, so with transit, and we get a lot of folks calling us and saying, I saw your bus and it was empty yesterday, right? I saw your train and it was empty. Yeah, sometimes it's going to be empty. But the nature of transit is you have to continually run it. At peak times, I will tell you that it's standing room only on the Metro Rapids, the 801, the 803, the number 20, which is a very popular route, the number 10, the 300, the 7, the Metro Rail service, like I mentioned, peak times is standing room only. So we are seeing. We've had a 9% increase in ridership this year. A lot of it is from the Metro Rapid service because, and that's a really good indication that transitways and dedicated space that you don't have to fight traffic really can work. And that's just minimal dedicated space, just in a couple of areas. So if we can open that up on a 21-mile corridor, you can imagine the difference it can make. So ridership is up. People ask us regarding fare box recovery, how much money do we make from our riders? Very little. And that's not what we're in this for. I mean, we are a public service and a public utility, so we don't expect to make money off our customers. Our fare box, although it is an important component, our fare box recovery is about 9 to 10%. The other service that's really ramped up in ridership is the express service, the express buses that come in from the northwest and the Round Rock area. We've seen an increase of double digits on those ever since the Mopac Expressway opened up and allowed our buses to ride there for free. That's essentially a transit way for us. And so people are really starting to catch on as they're riding that bus and passing all of these people, jammed up in traffic, and they're like, see you later. And there's Wi-Fi on board, and people get their work done, or they can take a nap, or they can talk to loved ones on the phone when they don't have a chance otherwise. There's a lot of, it gives you your time back. It is a gift of time. That's the most valuable thing you get. So another indication that dedicated transit ways will make a difference for people.
Yes, Jim Bryce, thanks very much for what you're doing. And the 801, 803 type of rapid ones are making a difference. People get the idea. It's sort of like a subway almost. I have a specific question, though, because it's a matter of getting the attention and the understanding of the public that has not been exposed to those things in cities like New York or Paris or Montreal or whatever. We have a bus that goes to the airfield, number 20 now. I try to tell people about that, and they still think they have to drive their car, yet if they park it for a few days, it costs more than the airfare. Yeah. It strikes me that that would be an area that more marketing and emphasis would draw more people in, and particularly people who are influencers. One thing needs to be done, however, and that is the bus needs to run 24 hours because of the first in and first out issues on the early and late flights. I don't think that's the case now. Is anything being done on that?
We don't
that would
have
make
any
a
service
big
that runs
difference.
24 hours. Yeah, that's a really good point. And the 20 is kind of the precursor to the Blue Line. And there are marketing efforts that have been done for that one, and I think they're going to ramp up, and particularly because of the Blue Line. As far as extra hours, I know that part of the Project Connect vision, particularly on these 2 high-capacity transitway services, is to run much later at night and much earlier in the morning. I don't know that it's in the plans to run 24/7, but we may get to that point at some point.
Hello, excuse me, Kelly Rayleigh, and one of my questions, the one that I'll ask, is you were talking about how you are working with partners and trying to get into the community and get this information out. And I was wondering, are you working with major employers? Are you working, so where could we find other similar talks, and what are your plans for working with large organizations to get the word out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things we've been planning in the last couple of months is a new outreach effort for major employers. We currently have a program called Metro Works, and some of our large employers, particularly downtown, have bought into this program. And what it is they buy bulk passes from us and give them out as a benefit to their employees so that they don't park. A lot of these places don't want to pay for parking anymore downtown. It's unsustainable. So we've already been connecting with those major employers that are MetroWorks partners. We have about 200 partners right now, but we've got a lot of businesses that need to be engaged. And so we're going to be making a new and concerted effort to reach out to businesses and employees. Service workers, for example. I mentioned people having to move out of town, further and further out of town, but still having to work in town. Think about all of the employees in all of those hotels that have to come in every day. And at hours, you mentioned the hours, at hours where we don't currently offer service. So that's definitely a community we really need to work hard to engage. So it's at the employer level, but also at the employee level, to give them the opportunity to learn that this is something that can greatly impact their lives. So yes, the answer is we are going to be making a much bigger effort with business outreach. And if there's a business that you work for or know of that you'd like to connect us to, let us know. We're doing our best to reach out, but it's also good to get ideas from the community.
Sam Duckworth. I work around town with a lot of the businesses, and I was wondering if you guys actually had bus routes that was dedicated to picking up and letting off employees at those businesses.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with those kinds of services. Sometimes companies will actually run their own shuttles, like Apple and Google tend to do this in the California area. We do not do dedicated business shuttles, but we do have a Metro rideshare service where people can carpool, get together in groups that live near each other and carpool to work every day with a Metro rideshare vehicle, which is usually like a Chevy Blazer. It's a really nice new vehicle. They're provided to us by Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and it's a really cost-effective way to get to and from work every day if you've got a group of people that you know live in your area. We can also work with employers to find people who live and work in the same area and work near each other to create those carpool groups together. They have one dedicated driver, and that driver is in charge of picking everybody up and bringing everybody home, and you have your hour that you pick up and your hour that you go home. So that's the closest thing we have to a business service. But it is a really nice, economical, and very flexible service to use. So I encourage you, if you know folks who are looking for an alternative to driving to work every day, that's a great one.
Hey, thanks for being here. My name is Lynn Adams, and my question may be a bit more technical, but could you dive in a little deeper about the comment that capacity is improved with trains or that type of transportation versus buses? I'm a
Yes.
big fan of trains, but I really kind of am working through that as
Sure,
you...
sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, for example, if we were to do bus rapid transit on a transitway that's running on the street, there's a limit to how many buses you can fit on that street. And there's a limit to how close together you can run buses as well. Now, when we get into the autonomous technology, whenever that's going to come out, those buses will be able to run much closer, and then there's a better capacity potential there. But if you can run a train with 3 or 4 cars, you're already beating out the single bus rapid transit vehicle, even though it's a larger bus than what we're used to. It's still going to carry more passengers. Also, the rate of frequency on a fully dedicated rail line, as opposed to buses, is higher. And the speed, I think, is higher too.
Hi, Jamie Maxwell. Do you know what the cost of providing the pickup service is compared to running a bus? And if it's lower, are there any, any possibility of expanding that service in the future?
So the question is the cost of operation, correct? Yeah. It depends on the neighborhood. That's the best answer I can give you, because it depends on if a neighborhood has a lot of density, that then a 40-foot bus makes sense because it has a potential for greater ridership. If a neighborhood has less density, and there's other issues too. I mean, there's how the topography of the neighborhood, how aligned how straight the streets are, whether they're curvy or. It is a much more cost-effective solution than you might think. We wouldn't be deploying them if they weren't. And there are plans to deploy more, a lot more. We're looking at a few areas right now, so probably by June. We do our service changes for Capital Metro, meaning we add or change or delete service 3 times a year. The next one is going to be June, and likely we will have a new pickup service, at least one, launched in June.
Tanya Tussing, I had a question about the tunnel. If you could talk about the pros and cons of the tunnel, what it would look like, and advantages and disadvantages.
Okay, and I want to preface this by saying I'm not a technical expert, okay? So I'm only parroting what I've heard from our technical team when they've been asked this question. So a couple of the advantages. Clearly, the big disadvantage, the gorilla, is the cost. Very expensive. And I will tell you, there have been a few myths that have been propagated in Austin about tunneling. And one of them is that the limestone here is too hard, it's too difficult to tunnel through. No, it's a very common myth, and we hear it all the time. And in fact, I thought the same because that's what I heard from people. And that's not true. Apparently, it is no different than anything else, and apparently, karst rock or limestone is porous and actually pretty easy to cut through. We've already built the Waller Creek Tunnel downtown, so it's doable. Okay, so that aside, one of the advantages of building a tunnel, aside from the reliability of the service, which is the big advantage, is that when you're constructing, you don't have to deal with as many conflicts. So other than the portals, which is the part where the vehicle will go down and the vehicle will come back out, a lot of that construction can go on beneath where most of the utilities are. So that's a really big advantage, that the construction crews can work without impacting the roads. But in terms of the service, having a downtown tunnel, if, for example, you wanted to run light rail service, just as an example, there's a limit to how many rail cars you could have on a road if it's running on the street, because they can only be as long as a city block. And our blocks happen to be about 3 cars long. If you go down in a tunnel, you could add cars. So that's about the length of the breadth of my expertise. But the big downside is going to be the cost. The big upside is going to be the reliability of the service. And that actually translates into the reliability of the service that trickles out into even the local bus service. Because what you're doing is breaking a clog downtown.
This is not necessarily maybe in the purview of Capital Metro, but certainly in dealing with transportation. In these discussions, has consideration been given to a dedicated multi-passenger lane for vehicles like exist in the city of Houston?
The HOV lanes? Yes. That's something I think that's really not our purview. That would be for the city to discuss. And I know that, for example, TxDOT is considering HOV lanes for the I-35 project. And if that's the case, that could be something that Capital Metro could take advantage of and use for bus service as well. I know they're under consideration, but I don't know about City of Austin.
I think we have time for one more question.
Elizabeth De Leon. My question is about the numbers. If I am now forced to transfer to another bus to get to my destination, do I count as 2 riders? Would that be responsible for some of the ridership increase numbers? My other question is, when you're downtown, they used to have the Dillos, and so it would be easier to get from one place to another downtown, and now it's a little bit difficult to get from, let's say, the convention center to Republic Square Park. So to get from, let's say, the train to the buses at Republic Square Park, is there any plan to make that transition easier?
Okay, both great questions. And the answer to the first one is yes, that is correct. So if you transfer, what we're counting is rides, trips. So that's true. That does contribute to ridership. That's a really good point. In regards to the Dillo, everybody, I can't tell you how many times I get asked about the Dillo. People love the Dillo. Downtown Circulator is something we were looking at from the beginning of this project. Downtown Austin Alliance is now taking over that idea, at least for the time being, and working out their plan to get a downtown circulator going. The blue line coming into downtown would actually connect with Republic Square Park. So both of those lines would be able to get you to, one way or another, you'd be able to transfer to the blue line from the orange, or take the blue line to Republic Square Park, or vice versa to the convention center. So that will help with that. So it is part of the plan, and it's something that we knew people wanted. It's a long walk, and when it's 105 degrees here, it is not fun. So yes, that's part of the plan. So regarding the circulator, it's still wait and see. We have been working closely with the Downtown Austin Alliance on a number of projects, and that's something that they are looking at. They're designing something now. I don't know any other details about it.
Jackie Nirenberg, thank you very much for being with us
Thank you all very
today.
much for the opportunity. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Thank you for your work. Thank you for your plans for this most vexing problem as we continue to try to accommodate and continue to grow our beautiful city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luther. Appreciate it.